Okay, guys, so in the previous lecture, we talked about the parole system, and we've mentioned that the parole system is an yearly release that can be granted by the executive authority to the inmate person when he accepts to be bound by some conditions made by the executive authority. And we evaluated the parole system, and we've mentioned the conditions of this parole system regarding the competent authority and the regarding the inmate person and whatsoever. In this lecture we will move to the implementation of the imprisonment. And actually, I don't know, since the pages of our booklet are not like numbered and they do not have numbers, so I recall my students to revise the booklet and to find the title implementation or the implementing of imprisonment, since we will continue talking about the second kind of punishments, the imprisonment or the detention. Anyway, in this page, after the title implementing the imprisonment, we will find some subsidiary titles or subheadings. The first one is regarding the competent authority of the reform and rehabilitation centers, and the second one relates the registration of inmates, and the third one is about the medical care that must be ensured for the inmate persons, and the classification and segregation between the inmates, and finally the inmates' education and working. Anyway, we will start with the first point regarding the competent authority of reform and rehabilitation centers. The Palestinian legislature regulates prisons by the law that is named and entitled the Reform and Rehabilitation Centers, which was issued 1998. And I think that I highlighted this law in my previous lecture regarding the parole system. Anyway, the centers wholly are attached to the Minister of Interior, and they must be run by the Reform Rehabilitation Centers Department, and this department is abbreviated as the RRCD, which means Reform and Rehabilitation Centers Department, and it has a manager, and this manager is the person who is responsible for every prisoner who is subject to the laws and bylaws of the department. Anyway, so when I give you a question, who is the competent authority regarding the reform and rehabilitation, you have to tell me that all of the centers of rehabilitation and reform are run or are the responsibility of the Minister of Interior, but precisely they are run by a manager of the RRCD or Rehabilitation and Reform Centers Department. Okay, this is regarding the first point, or the first head, the first subheading. The second subheading is the registration of inmates. The inmate cannot be entered to the center of reform and rehabilitation without a legal writ. So there must be a legal writ or a legal paper which says that this person has to be put in the jail and should be released only when the sentence is over. When the sentence is 5 years of imprisonment, then when the person spends these 5 years wholly and totally in the prison, then he must be released when this sentence is over. Anyway, personal information of every inmate should be registered carefully after verifying them. so that to ensure its correctness. In a way, such procedures are important in order to avoid the forced disappearance, since the forced disappearance is kind of the crimes that are prohibited not only nationally but also internationally, since the forced disappearance is considered as war of crime, or war crime, or crime of war, according to the Rome Statute. So the centers are under the oversight and the surveillance of the Ministry of Interior. Any breach of these these registrations, then in this case the person who in charge with this reckless regarding the registration shall be taking liability and responsibility for doing so. So the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Justice, these two ministries are practicing currently, and they practice as fact their surveillance and oversight on the centers of rehabilitation and reform. So every inmate shall enter the when he enters the prison or the reform and rehabilitation center, he must give his proper and correct information. The center management has to verify them and to register them after making sure that these information are correct ones. Anyway, every center also should have a medical clinic. So the third subheading is about the medical care of inmates. So every center should have a medical clinic, and I don't think that in Gaza we have one. And if we have one, it lacks a lot of medical equipments and medical logistics and everything. So every inmate should be subject to medical examination before entering the prison, so that if he is if this person suffers from some bad diseases, like if he is diabetic person, or if he has pressure or something like that, then in this case he must have special treatment. And if this person suffers from the AIDS or something, so he must be segregated from the other inmates, so that he is not contacting with them, and it may that he moves the virus from his body to the other's body. So every inmate should be subjected to the medical examination before entering the prison, and a medical report should be prepared and kept for each prisoner also. And this examination have to be renewed every 6 months. I think this is not mentioned here, but you have to know it, that every 6 months he must undergo an overall medical examination, so that we know if he has diseases or something. And the clinic should provide a medical care for the prisoners, and this is under article 13 of the Rehabilitation Reform Sentence Law of 1998. So anyone who is interested in this kind of laws can revise this law of reform and rehabilitation sentence, and to see what are the guarantees regarding the medical side of treatment. Number 4, the fourth subheading regarding the classification segregation of inmates. Actually, the prisoners within the prison are classified into 4 categories according to the Palestinian law. We have the remanded defendants, and we have those who are imprisoned for a certain number of years. And secondly, the prison inmates who committed financial crimes. Those who committed grave crimes or grave breaches, like crimes of murder, have to be segregated and have to be put in certain cells, while other persons, like those who committed only financial crimes, they have to be segregated and put in special cells that are away from those person who committed serious crimes like murder, or even who have addiction on the drugs or any kind of cocaine, heroin, or something like that. Also, we have a division for the non-recidivist persons. I mean, those who committed crimes for the first time and they did not repeat it, or who are not recidivists. I mean, they did not repeat their crimes. And the fourth cells are dedicated for those recidivist persons. I mean, the persons who committed their crimes not only for the first time but also for the second or even the 10 times. Anyway, so inmates have to be registered. Inmates have to be cared for their medications and their health care. Number 4, they have to be segregated in the cells of the Reform and Rehabilitation Center. Number 5, the inmates' education. The management of the Reform and Rehabilitation Center should avail all the requirements to enable the inmates access to knowledge. So when they need books, when they need lectures, they can find it. So the management of the rehabilitation center shall make all of these requirements available to every inmate who needs to access to knowledge, information, or to pursue their education, whether it is undergraduate studies or even the secondary studies whatsoever. So, for this sake, the management should avail the following things. Number 1, the illiteracy education for inmates in each center. Illiteracy means here محو الأمية. Library in each center. I don't think that we have in Gaza libraries. Entering books and magazines. Holding symposiums, which means I think it's kind of workshops, nadwa or something like that, lectures and information sessions for the inmates, and possibility to pursue education and high education. The granted certificates at the end must have no reference that it is granted to them while they were in the prison. So I will give you a certificate from Al-Azhar University, but I don't have to mention within this certificate, and I mustn't even put any sign within this certificate that it is granted to a person who is inmate, and this person got this education and that got this certificate when he was in the prison. So we have not to do this. After that, okay, sorry, I got message. The best thing I think about the electronic education is that I can give a lecture while I'm wearing a short, and actually the best thing is that I'm giving my lecture now while I'm lying on my bed, and I'm drinking some coffee, so I can do whatever I want. This is the difference between the physical kind of teaching and the electronic kind of teaching. Okay, back to our lecture. The inmate working. Are the inmates required to work while they are in the prison or not? The inmates have the right to vocational education while serving their sentences in order to gain a craft that can help them to make living after release. Since the rehabilitation center wants to remerge this person and to reintegrate these persons in the society after they are released, so I have to give him the possibility to learn a craft or something, or to practice their craft while they are in the prison. In some some prisons outside Gaza and the other countries, actually, rather than Palestine, they make the possibility to those prisoners to work outside the prison under the surveillance, under some restrictions also by the state. However, in Palestine, it's made that we grant them the ability or the possibility to practice their own crafts, or to make them also learning a new craft, so that they can make their living possible after they are released. The management also could engage the inmates to work in return for wages in and outside the center. Remanding defendants or those who service the jail sentence could not be compelled to work unless they are sentenced for a labor or for a hard labor. If the sentence is connected with a hard labor, then this is logical to make this person work. But if the person is only imprisoned for 7 years without labor, then I cannot compel him to work. So he mustn't be enforced to work or even to learn a craft. He has the choice whether to accept the offer made by the management to him or not. Number 7, the inmate's communication. Every inmate has a right to a visitant periodically, and the first visit could be only made after the ending of the interrogation or the lapse of 1 month after he is after he is captured by the authorities. Actually, the inmate have the right also to have unattended visit by his lawyer according to the request made by a lawyer or the inmate himself. The center manager is entitled to grant the inmates a leave for 3 days in case of his or her second level relative's death. يعني لو واحد مات أبوه أو أمه ممكن تمنحه سلطات إجازة ك3 أيام. لاحظوا أن النص اللي إجا في القانون may, the management may grant him. It means that the management has the discretion whether to give him this vacation or not to give him this kind of emergency vacation. The manager also could grant the person who shows a good behavior and good manner a leave for 24 hours at least every 4 months. And it is repeated, like every 4 months he can be granted this kind of 24 hours vacation, provided that this inmate already have served a quarter of the term. So if the person is sentenced for 8 years and he end 2 years, then after these 2 years the management could grant him a vacation for 24 hours every 4 months if he shows that he has a good behavior or good manner. And finally here, the last thing is about the discipline rules in the center. Discipline مهنة الانضباط داخل السجن. So the inmates are subjected to the disciplinary rules in the center. The manager could render disciplined punishment against the inmates, which may include, number 1, the warning. It's not conditioned to be connected with something else. But if he breaches this warning for the second time, then he may be punished with a solitary confinement, like when we put someone in a cell by himself, in a small cell. So the solitary confinement is kind of the punishment for dudes who are not disciplined. And this solitary confinement can be conducted for no more than 1 week each time. And the final kind of punishments for those who are not disciplined is that depriving them of some benefits for no more than 1 month each time. Like if we give every inmate 3 meals a day, we can deprive him of one of these meals as kind of punishment for this person, or to prevent him from his right to communicate with his relatives, or to prevent him of some kinds of vacations or any kind of privileges that are granted to the other persons or the other inmates inside the prison. Okay guys, I hope that I give you the lecture in a very simple way. I know that I did not use the Arabic as we accustomed to do, but I hope that you get what I'm saying now and what I will say in the other lectures. And I think that your English is really good and you can understand and you have the ability to understand my words.